The NHL trade deadline is less than a week away. We've got a lot to talk about: who's moving, who's staying, and which teams are going to be the most active. We've got all that and a whole lot more coming up on the NHL Squad Show.
You are talking puck with the NHL Squad Show. From the Oilers to the Stars, Golden Knights, and the Panthers, the Rangers, Avalanche, and yes, even the Maple Leafs. The Locked On Podcast Network brings together all its local experts to provide the scoops, breakdowns, and comprehensive looks at all the NHL, with plenty of trash talk to go with it. Don't miss the hard hits and glove-dropping hot takes on the Locked On NHL Squad Show. It's time to drop the puck.
Gil Martin here, and welcome to the NHL Squad. Sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and join us as we get you ready for another wild week across the NHL. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to welcome our cast of hosts today: Eddie Garcia from Locked On LA Kings, Tom Callahan from Locked On Utah Hockey Club, and I want to welcome to the squad for the first time Kyle Kjer, the new host of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. And gentlemen, we are just a few days away from the NHL trade deadline. Let's talk about some of the deals that went down over last weekend. Let's start with Gustav Nyquist, now being a member of the Minnesota Wild. Your thoughts on that trade? How much does it help Minnesota?
Well, been there, done that, right? For the Wild. Yeah, been there, done that for the Wild. This is his, I believe, his second stint joining Minnesota before the deadline to help him out in a playoff run. So veteran guy, they know him. Apparently they like him. So can help obviously with your maybe your top six there, being a veteran guy. But again, they familiar with him, having done it before. So I'm sure that helped Bill Guerin to make that move and bring him in. And does this signify more now for Nashville? I mean, we've kind of been talking about it all year. The season has not gone the way a lot of us thought it was going to be for the Predators. And so is this just the first trickle and opening up the faucet for them to make some more moves? We'll see.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nashville, I still have a lot of connections there, and they absolutely been open for business all year, and I would not be shocked to see Barry Trotz absolutely moving on some more guys. But reading between the lines for Minnesota, here's my takeaway, is that the Wild are, I don't want to say flailing, but they're sliding, right? They're not where they were. They're not playing as well as they were. This is going with the devil you know. Bringing a guy back in who already understands the culture, doesn't have to try real hard to fit back in. This is not a huge adjustment. So I think that this is trying to bolster the lineup with a little bit of fear around them not playing their best as of late and trying to stop the slide a little bit. So, I mean, for Minnesota, this move 100% makes sense. I think that's why they did it.
Absolutely. I think they need a little bit of that veteran experience. They, like you said, they've been sliding. Minnesota's that weird kind of not really talked about location, and this is something that can help. Kirill Kaprizov can only do so much every season, so they need someone like this that can bring in that Wild mentality and establish themselves in hopefully a long playoff run.
Do you think the deal was fair as far as what Nashville got back?
I mean, yeah, I would say so. He's an older player. I don't know what his value was around the league. I'm sure there were some other teams that would have been interested in him. But again, Minnesota, knowing him, as Tom was mentioning, made that a little bit more attractive. I think it's fair.
And I don't think Nashville's going to get a ton right now because teams know where they are. You know what I mean? So that's up to Barry Trotz to try to do his best to get the best return he can. But when you're such a blatant seller, teams kind of want to take advantage of you.
And yet there aren't a lot of teams because especially in the East, it's so bunched up. There's so many teams still in contention. It so far, most analysts believe it's been a seller's market because of scarcity.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. There's more buyers than sellers at this point. With so many teams still being in the mix in the East. It is interesting to see, though. Oh, There's interesting to see that there are dogs in the room right now, apparently. So let's defer to this for a second.
Well, that'll happen. That'll happen. Talking about sellers. So obviously 3 out of the 4 of us are in the West. It's easy for us to keep an eye on those teams. Chicago is selling. We know that. St. Louis is a cautious seller right now, but they're in the same place Utah is, which is the team I'm covering, in that they want to be opportunistic. They're not out of the wild card race, but they also have a longer term plan and are building a little bit more down the future. So they want to be opportunistic. Nashville's been open for business. Here's the interesting one in the East, though, guys. Gil, I'm interested to hear what you think. If you listen to what's coming out of Boston this past week, do they not sound like they're positioning themselves as a seller here at the deadline? They're kind of saying, well, we're looking ahead. We're thinking about the draft. That's seller talk to me, and that is shocking.
Yeah, it does sound like they are looking to sell. I mean, the thing in the East is that there are like 7 teams going for 2 spots. And so even if your team plays, 667 hockey points wise the rest of the way, there's no guarantee of you getting into the playoffs because it is just so crowded. And, the way Boston has kind of been disappointing this year, it wouldn't surprise me if they sell off a piece or 2. I'm not saying they're having a fire sale, but I definitely could see them being, trying to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. Kyle, what about the Ducks? I mean, they are a little bit maybe ahead of where most people thought they would be. They're not completely out of the race at this point. What do you think the Ducks are going to do?
Honestly, at this point, it's anyone's game when it comes to the Ducks. I kind of talked about it earlier today in my show. Like, are we a seller or a buyer? I really couldn't tell you. I want to say that we're probably going to go more for the selling. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster. They had a heater the last few games, but then they've been dropping some duds as well. So they have a lot of pieces that are ending. Their contracts are coming to an end. Ryan Strome, Brian Dumoulin. And everyone loves to talk about Trevor Zegras and John Gibson on whether or not they're staying or not. So honestly, I could see Verbeek trying to grab some assets. Elliot Friedman the other day kind of teased that maybe Rantanen would be coming to Anaheim. So that's been fun to kind of play with, but it's really up in the air at this point. I feel like we got to see how the next couple days go with their performance, and that'll really show where Verbeek's hand lies.
The other big move over last weekend was Seth Jones leaving Chicago, heading to the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers. Is this a big addition for Florida?
100%.
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. And hopefully no one rings the doorbell again. But Seth Jones, obviously a veteran player, very unhappy, didn't want to be in Chicago anymore. Florida, the window's open, obviously looking to repeat as champs. They're going to be in it to win it this year. Bringing in a reliable veteran guy who's been in a lot of NHL games, still has some good years in front of him. And giving up, a young goaltender that maybe could be the future in Chicago. Not sure about Spencer Knight for me at this point, but if he turns out to be the future in net, and they get that first round pick as well, maybe it turns out to be a very good deal for both teams. But as it stands right now, I would certainly say a great deal for Florida.
Chicago is now basically 4 deep on goaltenders, and they like all 4 of them. So they're in a position of strength there. I think that helps them. But also, it's no secret that Florida lost its big-time right-hand power play defenseman over the offseason to Seattle. So now they've been kind of looking to replace that piece. And it looks like Jones can be that guy. You hope he comes to you and is revitalized down the stretch here. Florida is in a very complicated race up top in the East. And I think that this is a move to clearly put them ahead. Knight going away, that Knight's not their window. Playoff Bob is their window if he's still playoff Bob. So I think that, Florida's loading up. They want yet another cup. So let's see how it goes.
It's also interesting that they're putting Tkachuk on IR right now, kind of doing the old Vegas move, as we said. It'll be kind of intriguing to see if Seth Jones can really bolster up the blue line. And then when playoffs come, if Tkachuk comes back, they could be a deep run team again this year. It's a little scary.
Do you think the move from a struggling team like Chicago to a cup contender like Florida will revitalize Jones?
I mean, I think it will, and certainly it's what he asked for. I mean, this is exactly what he wanted. He was sick of losing in Chicago. He saw that things weren't going to change likely anytime soon. He's not certainly old, but he's, been around the league for a while, and he's, been on some teams that have struggled. So he was looking to play some meaningful games. So if this is what he wanted, he got what he wanted. Now I think it's time for him to perform. I think he will.
All right. Well, we have got a lot more to get to on today's show. We're going to talk a little bit about outdoor games and what future they have. We'll talk a little LTIR, and we'll talk a lot about, well, the trade deadline. We've got all that and more coming up on today's Squad Show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, gentlemen, Kyle, you alluded to the LTIR situation, the way the Florida Panthers did it. We know the Vegas Golden Knights have a history of stashing players on LTIR, bringing new players in, and then activating everybody in time for the playoffs. The Tampa Bay Lightning have done it in the past and won Stanley Cups. Is this a rule that the NHL needs to address as far as either putting some limits on the rosters and the cap value in the playoffs, or just sort of trying to prevent teams from using this loophole in the future?
I mean, I think it's kind of interesting when it comes to injuries in the NHL compared to other sports where they really get down onto what the players' injuries are, and you get basically an entire X-ray list of what's happening to the player. Whereas with hockey, it's like lower body injury, upper body injury. It's very vague, and I know the GMs wanted it that way, and the Players Association kind of negotiated that as well. So I don't know if they need to make some kind of way that the NHLPA or some GMs can verify like this is an actual LTIR injury and that's why they need to be there. Other than that, I don't think it needs to be a rule change at this time, because only a few teams have been using it, and the players, as far as we know, were legitimately injured, and it just happened to be that their recovery time ended at the playoffs.
But should there be a cap of some kind for the playoffs? You go through the whole regular season, there's a limit on your salary cap. Should that also be extended to the playoffs?
Well, here's why it's not. The players aren't paid in the playoffs. They're only paid for the regular season. So I'm going to roll a grenade in the room right now and tell you why this is never going away. So number one, fans may not even know that, by the way.
Yeah.
Players are only paid to the end of the regular season. They get 26 paychecks and they're done. Then you're playing for playoff share, which comes out of the Players Association. So the further you get, the more money you make. So that said, here's why this is never going away. Because the only people who complain about it are the media and the fans. You know who loves it? The teams and the players. The Players Association loves it because guys get paid more money and they continue to get paid. The teams love it because they can stash their cap problems on LTIR. They both love the situation. It's never going away.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think there should be a rule change. I don't like that this loophole is something that teams can take advantage of. However, there seems like there's no movement whatsoever for any of the general managers to even suggest that there should be a change. So I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. And I will say that since it is something that is an option for teams to use, I think if my team was in a position to use this, I would be upset if they didn't. So even though I don't like the rule necessarily in general, I don't begrudge the Florida Panthers or the Vegas Golden Knights or the Tampa Bay Lightning or any other team that takes advantage of this. It's within the rules. Any team can do it if they want to. So it makes a ton of sense. I think the most amusing thing, though, about the Matthew Tkachuk situation was that apparently they didn't inform Paul Maurice about this when he told the media that Matthew Tkachuk wasn't out long-term. He used the term near-term. And then, of course, like 2 days later, he's on long-term injured reserve. So I don't think there's any – again, I agree with Kyle. I don't think these injuries are being fabricated. That would obviously be an issue, but they are taking advantage of legitimate injuries. And I have no doubt whatsoever that Matthew Tkachuk will be ready to go in game 1 of the playoffs.
And look, it is logical that as the season goes on and there's more wear and tear on the players, there are going to be more injuries, logically speaking, in March than there are in October. Just because they've played 50, 60 games already, and that takes a toll on everybody. But boy, it's one of those spirit of the law versus letter of the law situations that can be a little bit frustrating for teams that don't have the opportunity to use that loophole. So I agree with you, Tom. I don't think they're going to change it anytime soon, but it is one of those things that raises an eyebrow. Let's put it that way. Last weekend, we also had the Stadium Series outdoor game in the Horseshoe in Columbus, Ohio, a historic, and I thought a very well, and this is a Michigan alum speaking, a well-chosen venue as far as, where they could hold games. But it almost seems to me like the outdoor games are just getting less attention. They're almost becoming passé in this day and age. Your thoughts, guys?
I think if your franchise is hosting it, it's special. I think if you're playing in it, it's special. Beyond that, once again, me as a rabid NHL fan did not remember that there was an outdoor game in Columbus until after it happened. So I don't even know if the league cares as much about these outdoor games as they used to. I think it mattered to the Columbus Blue Jackets, their fans, and it was a nice setup, as you mentioned. It was well done, but again, I remember that when they announced it, and it's funny, I didn't even think about it until after it happened. Like, who told me the game was going to be outdoors this week? And I've been on NHL.com. I've been combing the social media. No, there are really no big in-your-face reminders like there's been in previous years. So I don't even know if the league cares as much as it used to.
Well, I think there's been an oversaturation of it. And we talked about this a little bit on a previous squad show when we talked about the Four Nations and people like, oh, this is amazing. Let's do more of this. No, let's not do more of this. Let's keep it every other year so it doesn't lose its specialness. I think that happened because the NHL, of course, wanted money. They wanted to make these outdoor games be in other places. I would love to see him go back to just have it on January 1st, just have the one game, have it be actually on the 1st. And I know there's college football bowl games and that kind of stuff. Have it on the 1st so we all know it's there, and have it be the only game. Don't have it like, a part of 12 other games on the schedule. Make it a unique thing so it's special. And another thing that I'm growing really tired of, and I know there are no original 6 franchises represented in this group, that they always have to force an original 6 team in there. They don't have to do that anymore. We've got 2 outdoor games coming up in Florida. I would have loved to have seen the Panthers take on the Lightning. We don't have to have an original 6 team injected into this. You've got 2 teams that have won Stanley Cups recently. They can be on their own. They don't need to be propped up by some old franchise that the NHL feels like, well, we got to include one of those. We've seen the Blackhawks way too many times. I don't want to see the Chicago Blackhawks involved in one of these darn games anymore. So there are certain things they can, I think, do to make this more special. Again, let some of these franchises like Columbus have that stage, make it special, make it feel like it's different and not just the same old, well, we got to go to Boston or we got to go to Chicago anymore.
It's only been 57 years, right? 58 years since the original 6 ended. So maybe it's time. Although in defense of the original six thing, I would add the Penguins to that mix, even though they're a second six team. I think they've been in an outdoor game like every 3 years, maybe even more frequently than that on average.
Yeah, I think especially with trying to grow the game, and they're trying to bring these non-major markets more involved and get a lot more of the youth involved. Having those staple teams, it's like, okay, those fan bases have been established. We need to get, like you said, more Dallas, LA, Anaheim, maybe even Minnesota, because like they're the state of hockey, and I feel like they barely get an outdoor game.
I mean, right here, we have the host of the Kings and the Ducks. I mean, that would be a great matchup, a built-in rivalry. Dodger Stadium, I mean, or the LA Coliseum, whatever's available. There are plenty of venues out there. I'm sure you guys would love to see a game like that.
Even the
they did that.
They did.
Yeah, they did have it at Dodger Stadium back in 2014. I'll tell you this: I wouldn't mind seeing a Rocky Mountain matchup. How about Utah, Denver? In Denver, I mean, that to me has an appeal to it as well. So get it in different areas, get different fan bases involved. Again, don't feel like you have to have that crutch of having an original six franchise in there. And I think that to me as a hockey fan, it has more appeal than just seeing the same things over and over again.
Yeah, there's certainly things they could do to enhance the experience for fans and to not oversaturate and maybe just to bring a little more attention. I think, as you all said, let people know when the game is, have a spotlight on that game as opposed to having 12 other games like they did on Saturday. Trade deadline coming up real fast. We're going to get to that, talk a little bit about who may be the most active teams, who are some of the players who may be moving. We've got that next on the Squad Show. So we had a little flurry of activity before Four Nations. We had a little flurry this past weekend. When do you see the next big flurry of activity coming? Is there going to be another, series of moves made well before Friday, or is everything going to happen at the last minute?
I do wonder about the Mikko Rantanen domino falling and how that affects things, the uncertainty around him. Is he going to resign? Is he going to test free agency? They've made the offer. What does Carolina do? Do they say, well, they're not going to get return for him from some other team. So do they just say, let's just go with it for him this year and hopefully it works out? It's such a tough situation. I feel bad for the Hurricanes. I thought, the move that they made to get him certainly was a bold move, and you thought, wow, and nobody saw that coming. And they're desperate to have a superstar player to kind of build around. I know they've got some good talent there, but not a real true, alpha there. And they feel like they've got him, and now he doesn't seem interested in staying there. He wants to apparently test the market and see what else is out there. Maybe he's not a fit in their system. He certainly hasn't been a difference maker so far. So I just wonder if they're the teams that are out there lurking saying, could we have a shot at this guy? Do we have to wait and see exactly how this pans out? Does Carolina have a set time where they say, maybe we have to flip him? Maybe we have to get something in return rather than let him walk and trying to go. So I think that domino, when that falls, maybe that kind of sets the tone for the rest of it.
Eddie, I agree with you because I had 3 key dominoes, one at each position. One's already moved. Jones to Florida. Now the defense market will open up. And then Rantanen, everybody's waiting to see what's going to happen to him. And I'm not talking about like third, fourth line players. I mean the premier players that are available at the deadline for forwards. We're waiting on Rantanen. And then goaltenders, actually, Kyle, great that you're here because I think it's all waiting on John Gibson and whether or not Edmonton is going to get him.
Yeah, he's been like, for the last couple of years, it's always been, is Gibson leaving? Is Gibson leaving? Some of the fans think that he doesn't want to be here, but I've heard that he loves it in Orange County and with Anaheim. But the way I looked at it, he hit the 500 game mark. He's the most tenured Anaheim goalie we've had. I think it's his time to leave. I think this is it's almost an insult to the NHL and hockey in general to have this type of goaltender who throughout his career has a 910 save percentage. and he's just sitting on this Anaheim squad. He hasn't seen the playoffs since like 2013 or something. It's been crazy since he's just been sitting here backstopping, seeing about 30 to 40 shots a game. To put him on a squad like Edmonton, or even I was thinking even Toronto, maybe they need, they're always hunting for a goaltender, as someone that can bring that kind of presence to their playoff run would be huge.
And for people who don't know, and I hate to admit this as a Kings fan, I mean, the Ducks have a guy, Lucas Dostal, who certainly appears to be a phenomenal goaltender, up-and-coming guy that can really anchor their net for a long time. So they've got that obviously waiting in the wings as well, and appear to be ready to take over that job for next season.
Definitely. He seems like such a staple too. When he's in net, it seems like the players kind of play a little bit more aggressive and upfront because he is that younger goaltender. So I think Gibson's time has come to an end here in Anaheim.
I'll believe that when I see it, because, no offense to the Ducks or any Ducks fans out there, but it's been like 3 years that we've been hearing rumors about Gibson and Zegras, and they never move.
Mm-hmm.
Not that that's a bad thing, but they never move.
With Verbeek, it's hard. I think he was raised by the Yzerman plan. He knows how to keep a tight lip and to be kind of just a stern guy. And it's literally tomorrow he could shotgun the whole team or be a buyer. It's really hard to tell with him what he expects. And the Boo Birds out here, they more want the coach to go than the players. So that we have a lot of attachment to our players out here. Even letting Cam Fowler go was a big one. So we'll see how it turns out. But I really think that of all the pieces that will move, Gibson is the one that will be out of here.
Well, you mentioned Steve Yzerman. Detroit might need a goaltender. There's certainly a relationship there between Verbeek and Yzerman, so maybe that's a connection as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that Husso deal's what cleared the tracks for them to move Gibson, because they'll just bring Husso up to back up Dostal, and there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about the logjam in the East? Some of those teams will probably be buyers. Some of those teams will probably be sellers. But how do you think that logjam in the standings is going to affect the deadline?
I mean, it could certainly make it go right down to the wire. I'm the Rangers, we've talked about them a lot on the squad shows. And they did make a move this week as well, but certainly not a big move. But you still wonder with them, they're just holding on. And at some point, are they going to, like we talked about Boston earlier, decide that this isn't the year and to cut our losses? So I don't know. It could really go down to the next couple of games where teams like that are deciding whether they're going to be buyers or sellers or not.
And then you have teams that are in different situations, like the Rangers and the Bruins. They've made the playoffs plenty in the last 5-10 years. What about teams like Ottawa and Detroit, who have missed the playoffs for so long, and their fans and maybe even the jobs of the coaches and the GMs are on the line if they don't make the playoffs?
Add Columbus to that list. They're having a surprise year. Not that, Columbus surprising, good for them, but that's a team I lump into that category of teams that are going to look to add and try to do so. But here's the thing is, how much can you really give up if you're those teams? I would argue not a lot. Your draft pick, if you're giving up a first rounder, is probably going to be a mid-first round. So that's something to think about. But as far as if you think your team is good and it's building and it's on the up, you certainly don't want to give away a key piece. And I don't know that those teams are saying to themselves, looking in the mirror, man, do we really have what it takes to win 16 games and hoist the Stanley Cup? I know you get in, you can win. I know we all survive on that theory, but I just don't know if those teams are there just yet. So I think they have to be cautiously optimistic and very careful about how they approach it.
A team that I think that should be very careful this trade deadline is Buffalo, because look at the pieces that they've lost. And every year it's Buffalo's going to do it this year. They're going to be great. And then it just teeters off. And you got Tage Thompson, you've got Krebs, you got all these guys that are really good assets that could be phenomenal on another team. But if Buffalo lets them go and all of a sudden you got the next Jack Eichel in Carolina or New York or wherever he ends up, they just are going to watch all these players that they home grew and then lost.
Dylan Cousins, Bowen Byram, Owen Power. I'm from Buffalo. I understand this pain. Okay. This is exactly what the Sabres have gone through the last couple of years. And the scuttlebutt around the league is, and we even heard it said publicly, that guys don't necessarily want to go there because they have this losing culture. Nothing appears like it's changing. So then what do? You get desperate. You give up on guys early, which a lot of teams do. I think a lot of teams give up on development too early. But man, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I think that a lot of these teams are, and sometimes as a GM, you want to look like you're doing something maybe to save your job. But Buffalo is a special case of bad. And they just don't hang on to anybody or anything long enough to build around them. And what good does bringing assets in, throwing them right back out do you? So I agree with you. They really do need to tread carefully.
And even guys who they do bring in that want to be there, like Alex Tuck, who's from the area. And there was a lot of hoopla about, hey, this is a guy who really wants to be here. And now you hear his name being brought up. I know he would be a great fit in LA, but I think a lot of other teams are certainly interested in him as well. So even when they do get someone from outside to come in as a free agent and someone who has ties there, and you think this is a perfect fit, now there's talk of him maybe being on the leaving town as well. So it's a tough situation there.
It is a tough situation. Winning breeds winning, and losing breeds losing. And it really does become a problem when you haven't won in so long to get, players to come and to have them be enthusiastic and maybe even to play to their potential. Well, it's going to be a very interesting week. And the trade deadline, as we said, Friday at 3:00 Eastern time. So we're all looking forward to that. I want to thank Eddie Garcia of Locked On LA Kings, Kyle Kjer of Locked On Anaheim Ducks, and Tom Callahan of Locked On Utah Hockey Club for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I want to thank everybody for joining us here on the NHL Squad. Have a great week, everyone. We'll be back next week.